Hello and welcome. Today I'll be coloring up this house mouse image. I love house mouse. They're so sweet. They always make me laugh. I'm glad that they're still making these after 20 years because I just look forward to every release that they have. So anyway, let's color up this mouse. Alright, these are the markers I usually use to color the house mouse. These are the three I usually use on the skin, and these are the three I usually use on the fur. I'm going to set my fur ones aside. I'm going to do the skin first. And I like to color the skin with my lightest tone first. And because his hand's right here, I'm just going to do that together as one little piece. And then I'm going to come in with my E-double-O and start flicking in some shadow. In this case, it's really more or less color because this is such a light color. And then E93 is kind of an odd choice, but it's a very, very pinky color, and I love this color for like blush or just adding a little bit of life into your critters. So I'm just putting in a little bit of E93, and then I'm going to come back in here and blend that out. There we have his soft, cute little face. And then to do the hand, which I forgot to do earlier, so let's re-wet that. And we'll come in here with the ears. Now, his hands are so tiny in this. I'm just adding a little bit of color to make it stand out, but it's not really quote-unquote shaded a whole lot. It's not really shaded a whole lot. And I'm just adding pink into the inside of his ear, but I'm going to leave the rest of his ear really the lighter brown. Just adding a little pink to his hands. And now I'm blending that out. And now we have his little feet. And I'm not worried about these little sprinkles here at the bottom at the moment. Oh, and I'm also going to just put a little bit of this on his belly because he's got kind of a bald spot on his belly. And then coming in, oh, let's start with E93 on this. I'm just adding a little bit of pink. And again, this more or less just adds a little bit of life to our mouse. Makes him feel warm. Oops. Again, just blending that out. Okay, so we got all the skin areas colored, so I'm going to set my skin tones aside. And now I'm going to pick up my fur, which is E30, E31, and E33. You could choose to do this in grays if you wanted. I mean, people do all sorts of things. There's E20 series is another good one for the mice. There's really no wrong brown for a mouse. This is just out of habit what I use most of the time. So I'm covering all of the fur area, and I'm just blending into that belly bit a little bit with the E30. And then I'm going to come in with my E33, and I'm going to start flicking in the darkest areas of the mouse. And here along the arm. And then I'm coming in with E31 and I'm continuing those flicks. Now they're getting longer. And then I'm going back to my E30. I'm just blending that in the areas that I think need it. And in this case, because he's furry, I'm not worried about perfect blending. I don't mind if it has the appearance of hair. That doesn't bother me. I just want the shadows to look right. I want his arm to kind of stand out a little bit. So I'm going back and darkening up the edges of his arm a little bit. I'm going to darken this up too. And actually might let this dry and then come back in and add some more. And I'm just trying to soften this line on his belly because it looks too harsh to me. Actually might darken up his belly just a little bit. That looks more natural to me. It's a little darker than my original, but I'm okay with that. All right. So I'm going to call my mouse done for now. I am going to come back and add in some additional shadow, but I need this to dry first because I don't want the colors to blend. I want them to be separate. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and color the frosting on our cupcake. And I wanted it to be white so that the colored sprinkles would pop off, but obviously need to add some color and shading. So I chose my E50 series, and let's go ahead and color this section of our card. So I think I'm going to set E55 down and focus mostly on these three colors, and if I need to, I can come in and add that just in the deepest, darkest places. I don't want my cupcake frosting to start to look brown, so that's why I want to make sure we use the least amount of that. And I'm not going to worry too much if I go over the sprinkles because the sprinkles are going to be done in a darker color. So right now I'm taking E50 and covering all the areas that you can see frosting. I'm not doing all of it because the top part's just a ball of sprinkles. And then I'm going to come in with E53 and I'm going to start flicking in the shadow in each one of these folds of frosting. And I'm putting a little bit under where all the sprinkles are hitting on the cupcake because those are going to be shadowed by the sprinkles a little bit. Then I'm coming in a little bit more and just blending that out. Now, if you're familiar with these colors blend so easily, which is another little bonus of using them. All right, now I'm coming in, and this I'm using very, very little of, and I'm just using it more or less to give the frosting shape. I don't want this to be the color of the frosting. So just in those little folds and along the bottom where it's hitting the cake part. See, I don't know. I'm just hunting for any shadows I missed and maybe little ones here and there. And to soften that, so I'm all done with that E55, I'm just going to go back through my colors. And blend that out And this is going to feel very light, and it should. We want it to feel light. The reason I'm doing this now is that I want this to dry, so when I color the sprinkles that this ink is already dry and not going to blend as much with the colors we put on top for the sprinkles. And I'm going to do the same actually for the ground. So now I'm going to pick up my my grays, my W series, and I'm going to do the ground as well because that's where the sprinkles are. I want that to dry. That is the hope, so that we can, like I said, layer our colors and they won't blend as much. Let me move these. All right. So this is W5. I'm going to use very little of this, and I'm not going to try to go over the sprinkles, but I'm not going to worry about them. You know, I'm not trying to dodge every one of them, but I'm not trying to go over them either. And I'm just putting in and grounding my image so it doesn't look like he's floating so much. I think that might be it for the darkest gray. It's just a little bit. And then I can move my way down. And as I go, I'm putting down more of this color. Now W1 is very light, and so here is we start to really add in the ground. And lastly, I'm just going to blend those edges out with W0. Just to make sure that this mouse feels like he's standing on something. Awesome. All right, so now we're going to color the sprinkle jar, and obviously we want the jar to be clear because we want to be able to see all the sprinkles that are inside of the jar. So I'm going to use my grays to do that, just to add a little shadow to the jar. So C3, C1, and C0. And in the parts of the jar that I think are the darkest, which would be the artist has kind of told us where those lines are. Those are where the dots are. So I'm kind of just filling in and shading over those lines where I think it's the darkest. Now I'm going to be careful here because I want the sprinkles to show. I don't want to add a ton of color there because I want, you know, whether it's realistic or not, I want the sprinkles to take center stage because that's kind of the focus of this card. I am going to add a little to the bottom of this, but I don't want to cover up this whole mass of sprinkle in the jar. So there's C3, and now I'm just going to blend this out a little bit with my C1. And my C0. So now we have a glass jar waiting to be filled with sprinkles. Okay, to color this, I use my B18, 16, 14, and 12. And I am going to start in the folds of the cupcake wrapper, and I'm just putting a tiny amount of my B18 And I'll be honest with you, this is tough to control. If you are new to Copics, don't maybe skip B18 or color this without the B18 and then go in with a colored pencil and you can darken up the shadows that way because a colored pencil is a lot easier to control. And I am trying to skip over because this color is much darker. Trying not to get any of that on the little sprinkles. And now I'm going to just continue to blend this out. So wherever I put the B18, I'm coming in with the B16 and widening that shadow a little bit, doing my best to stay out of the way of the sprinkles. And I'm trying to work very quickly because I don't want my ink to dry. I want to be able to blend it the best I can. So now I'm coming in with B14. And then lastly B12. At this point, I'm just using the B12 to blend in any areas that I wasn't super happy with. So I'm just working those areas. I'm pushing the color around with the B12 to get it to the part where I want it to be a little smoother or a little less of a harsh line. But in the cupcake, you kind of want some harsh lines because you have that very distinct fold in the wrappers. So there's that. I might come in here, I'm looking at this a little bit. See a couple areas that still not super happy with. I think what I'm going to do here is with my B16, in just a few of these folds, I'm going to put in more shadow because I feel like I blended that out a little too much. So just mostly in the front here. Trying to give the cupcake wrapper back its shape. Now I could have done this with B18. However, B18 is very dark, and this way I can control what I'm doing here a little more. Now this is the nitpicky part. I enjoy hunting down these shadows, but I could see how someone may go, this is super tedious, and it looked fine, and it did. It did. No one was going to question that. But I like having those folds in there, and I like the shape that it gives. So I was going to add some W grays, but I actually decided I'm not even going to do that. I think that looks fine. Okay, to color the cake part on this cupcake, I chose E27 and E25. And it's just, there's only a little bit of it showing. It's just right here between the cupcake wrapper and the frosting. I guess that's where you keep cake, but I didn't even think it was super obvious in the finished card that this was, what, you know, that it was even there. Kind of just blends in to the whole thing. My question is, why isn't there more frosting on the cupcake? Shouldn't the frosting cover all of the cake? The answer to that is, of course, yes. So whoever frosted that cupcake was skimpy on the frosting. Okay. So that's done. And then I grabbed some purples, and I think I couldn't quite remember which purple I used, but I'm going to start with V12 because I can always go darker. I think I am going to go darker. Yep. So, and what I'm doing here in this jar is I'm coloring this all purple because I want to make sure I'm not leaving white behind when I do the dotted, you know, the sprinkle effect. So I wanted it to look like all the sprinkles were colored. And then I can go back in and color. And I'm actually I'm not gonna color, but I'm gonna kind of just take and dab on these sprinkles just to give them. Now you have to be careful here that you're not going outside the lines here, or you're gonna have some weird markings on your cupcake. But the fact of doing this a million times was not super attractive to me, so I thought, well, let's do a little cheating here. We're still going to have to go up and down a bunch of times, but this is going to help add some depth to what we're doing here. So, and just in the masses where there are a bunch of them together, I can add some background color. So if we miss anything, it looks more natural. I'm trying to understand how the shadows here would work a little bit. I'm thinking that maybe I'll take my lighter purple because it'll be a thicker glass. Because it would be a continuous blob, wouldn't it? Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. All right, so the last little bit of coloring I want to do with my Copics is to add a little bit of shadow into this mouse. So I grabbed BB 20 and 23, and I'm just going to come in here and just ever so lightly add a little bit of shading with these purples to the mouse. It just gives him a little bit more shape. The trick is to not go too much or you end up with a goofy looking mouse. So you definitely want to go on the lighter end. But I'm adding in his arm. Hopefully you can see that his arm's now moving a little bit forward from his body. And I put a little bit in his ear. And I'm going to take E30 and just blend that out a little bit. I don't want it to look purple on his body. I just want it to be shaded. But I think that works. So I just softened it a little bit with E30. Okay, the last step that I have is to put some definition on the sprinkles. I decided not to use my Copics for this, so I went through my stash to find other options, and these I actually bought at Walmart recently through the lockdown. They're just gel pens, and so I tried them on scrap paper because I didn't have these when I made my original, and I just wanted to see. So I mean, there are acceptable options. I still think I like my original thing the best. This is a glaze pen. I like this because it dries with a shiny finish, and I just thought the sprinkles would have a shiny finish. I might use all three. I might use just the one. I don't know. I'm going to speed this up a little bit after I get going so you don't have to watch the entire process. But I did exactly what you think I did. I just went through and placed in this. The thing I really like about this pen is that just an up and down motion is enough to add color and a little shine to each one of those sprinkles. So after a little bit, I'll speed this up just so again, you're not watching the whole process. I'm going to kind of do them randomly because I'm wondering if I should mix up the colors. Might try something a little different than my first one. So I'm finished. I just wanted to compare what I did the second time versus the first time. I put a little less sprinkles in, and I let a little bit more of that Copic shine through here in the jar, and actually to me I like that better. I also tapered it off here a little bit, and here I made it even. Just little subtle details. Actually, I think I like this better. And this will take about a minute or so to dry, the glaze pen, and then I can start assembling this card. So hopefully this wasn't horrible. I think this took me less than I'll double check on the footage, but I think it took me less than 2 minutes to do this. So this wasn't as awful as it seemed going in anyway. So hopefully that was helpful. If you don't have, use what you have. Don't go out and get something special just for this, but I have a feeling you can find something in your stash. Even, a colored pen. I think, like a regular colored Bic pen would work for this as well. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and glue this together. I used one of my favorite background stamps to stamp on this blue, and this blue is one of my favorite blues. Unfortunately, it's called Tempting Turquoise. It was retired by Stampin' Up, I don't know, a few years ago. But I may or may not have purchased several packs because I was worried I'd cry a little if I couldn't get my hands on it. So, and I only use it on my favorite projects. So I'm just putting a line of glue at the top. And I'll do the same thing at the bottom. And then I just tied the twine around the edge of this card. Okay, so here is the finished cards. Here is the original on the left, and the one I just completed here on the right. There's a couple little subtle differences, but overall, I did think of one thing I wanted to do here. I'm going to go in with my white gel pen, and then the white of his eye, I'm just going to make that a tiny bit whiter. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you like this House Mouse card. I love House Mouse. I'm sure you'll be seeing more of him. And enjoy your day, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.